Hey everybody, thank you for joining me again. I'm Yizz the Eunuch, and today I want to talk about endemic racism, systemic racism, the boogeyman responsible for the things we are told by the intersectionalists are ruining things, keeping the POC and the LGBT down, so to speak. Now, before I get started, I'd like to make it clear that this is just going to be a rant. I'm still struggling with my studio, so you get what you get today. So anyway, the thing that has been bothering me, I've been reading a lot of news lately, and the most common thread that really digs a knife into me about this intersectional narrative, this leftist narrative that most of us despise, is this concept of powerful, supreme whiteness that pervades culture at this fundamental level. This level of, it's in schools, it's in government, it's in families, it's in everything, right? Okay. Well, while I know that personal experience is only anecdotal and that you can't apply that to a massive population, it is this personal experience that makes me keep coming back to this and wanting to fight it, because I'm from a redneck mountain place, as most of you know, on the border of East Tennessee and Virginia. I am from a place that is full of God-fearing white people, anything from rednecks to, big game hunters and school teachers that go to church 4 times a week, that kind of thing. God-fearing mountain folk that, if you're going to pick a poster child for people that are, I guess, token white supremacists in accordance to the media and the far left narrative of legacy media, it would be the people that I come from. It would be them. They dip skull, they have the iconic white supremacy goatee, that kind of thing. Well, the reason that this concept of baked-in white supremacy being in everything hurts me is because of specifically how I grew up and what I was subjected to and how I lived. So, turn back the clock 35, 40 years. I grew up in the early 80s. And every school I went to, every church I went to, every family group, every gathering, there were no black people. None. Not a single one, as far as the eye could see. Except for elementary school. We'll get to that in a minute. In just 1 second. So, the reason I paint all this is to just let you know how white isolated I was. Like a lot of people that grew up in rural areas in the mountains or, in the plains of America. So the reason I bring this all up is there were only a handful of people in my entire youth experience that I think were in any way racist. And the ones that were, I don't even think would be considered white supremacists. I think they would be considered backwards, ignorant, I guess, hotheads, morons, I don't know, pick one. So, 2 members of my immediate family, 1 friend of my father's, my horrible father himself, he's dead now, thankfully. But outside of these 4 men, even from the time I was little, from my earliest memories, I recall no one at all. Oops. I bumped the camera. I recall no one at all saying ugly things like "in this" or using the F-bomb or talking about Jews in a stereotypical way. None of that. The 4 guys, when they would bring up and say the N-word or other ugly words for, whatever, it was always couched in this sort of feeling sorry for themselves way, like, I can't believe the N's get this kind of free ride, or them Jews from New York doing A, B, C, D, E. It was never couched from a I am better than them so they need to go type of way. It was sort of from the typical reactionary right response of get off my bottom land, don't tell me how to think, you're different from me so take a hike type of stuff. Now, I know that arguably you can easily call that white supremacy. I won't argue that. That's a fair point for the white supremacy narrative, and I get that. So I don't want to argue that. But the point is, I know I'm rambling, forgive me. I enjoy talking. The point is here, every school I went to, every teacher, every principal, every adult figure in my life, every pastor, every church elder, everybody in my life always taught one unified message about race. And it was the same one they taught about everything. Even about LGBT people. And not back in the 80s, that was a pretty hot button issue with, the explosion of AIDS and all that mess. So I was always taught this: judge not by the color of someone's skin, because it's not up to you, it's for the eyes of the Lord to discern. Now, that's a pretty heavy Christian narrative, but these people also love America. They love their idea of the Constitution and what America means. They love the idea that America coincides so comfortably with their Southern Christian values. Individualism, liberty, a person's choice is all that matters. You can choose to be a good person. You can choose to donate to charity. You can choose to invite Jesus into your heart, whatever that is, and gain the keys to heaven or whatever. Like, choice and individuality is at the paramount of these people's ideas. And to think that a culture that is so married to this idea at a paternal level could be an endemic, wide-sweeping cult of white supremacy is not only logically wrong, I believe that if you put time to study it, you would find that it is statistically wrong. Because in the last 2 weeks, I've been making connections. I moved back east, by the way, to take care of my mother and her husband. They're both bad off. But I've been talking to hundreds of people from the area that I started off in. And they are still, as I remember from decades ago, they are open-minded, they love God, they love country, they love everyone. Everyone. Black, white, tall, Jew, Asian, gay, straight, they don't care. They really don't. And I know that this is a subset of America, but I am the key demographic, and I'm from the key demographic in the key area that is supposed to be the hotbed of this white supremacy narrative. And I don't see it. I don't think it's real. And I would have seen it by now. I would have noticed it growing up where I did, being exposed to the systems I was. I would have felt it. I was a prime candidate for it. They tried to raise me as a boy, so they tried to make me a man. That didn't go so well. But, so I got the typical man talk and stuff in my first 10 years. Not a single peep about anything racial, anything about God and country and people and blood and soil, none of that. None of it. It was all about why we fought the wars we fought in the 1900s, why the Constitution matters, why Abraham Lincoln and his vision of what liberty and justice for all and all that stuff was, by the people, for the people, all the founding fathers. That's what I got taught. I got taught that. All of the libertarian Jesus stuff of separate from church and state. We don't want the government, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is between me and God. That's between, me and Caesar. That type of separation stuff. That's what I was taught. Every angle. Every single bit. Everyone that I knew growing up was taught the same. I didn't have any friends that seemed to be involved in families or groups that were racial identitarians. Never saw that a single time. Now, the story I was going to bring up that I mentioned earlier. In my elementary school, there was one black person. One. And I won't say her name or what year it was, so I don't want to, cause anybody undue problems. But someone, I think I was in the first grade. I think I was 6 years old. I wasn't even present. Someone in the lunchroom called her the N-word when they were arguing. You know how kids do. So, from what I heard, since they weren't in my class, the principal and someone else, I think the teacher, sat down and talked to these two students about why that word can be awful and why it matters when you're talking to someone that has a black skin tone. Because no one in my school really even understood it. That's how alien racism was where I grew up. We knew the concept of there were slaves in the past, and that was wrong. But the concept of racism and that kind of skin-based prejudice in our universe that we all lived in was such an alien concept. We had to be taught it in a vacuum, outside of curriculum, outside of everything. We had to be told what racism was and how in some places in America there were lots of black people and lots of white people and Asians that all lived together, and there were a lot of old-timey prejudices that survived. And not everybody was, now this is their words, not mine, not everyone was a God-fearing Christian that saw people's heart and not their skin. That's the language of where I grew up now, so you understand. But, So, there were only 250, 260 kids at this school. Not a huge school, but, 30 or 40 faculty. And for racism to be such an alien concept to an entire school's children population, I'm not buying this endemic white supremacy. I'm not buying it, because it was in a backwards ass place with God-fearing religious folk that ran everything, and they were 100% white. Not an Asian, and to my knowledge, no Jews, no European whites, all just mutt American whites that lived in the mountains. So take that for what you will. Anyway, so after they sat down with these two kids and told them that, the next day it filtered into all the other classrooms, and we had a short little talk about racism, about why it is bad to use the N-word or other hateful words, because when you're an adult, there are people that can be severely harmed, and the whole incitement to violence thing, like in hindsight, that's what they were teaching us in school, is you have to be careful, because your words, even in ignorance, can cause pain and suffering and damage to people's lives for a word that you might think is just a joke you heard Chris Rock say on cable television. And we all got the talk, and the rest of my scholastic career that I went to those series of private and then public schools for the next 12 years, I never once saw anyone, even in the bigger school I went to where there was 1,000 kids, never saw one of the few black kids called the N-word or any other racial ugly word in hate and anger. Not a single time. And the only time that I heard that kind of talk was from a handful of these asinine, I guess the best way to label them would be the machismo redneck supremes. The ones that the WWE character Steve Austin are based upon, sort of, I suppose. The ones that have the fish hook on the hat, and they think that the coolest thing they can possibly do is to drink a lot and beat someone up and that kind of thing. Outside of this small number of idiots, forgive my Bezmenov, out of these small number of idiots, I never heard that kind of talk. Not once. And the few times that it came up, like if a coach or a teacher overheard, these idiots being edgy and saying ugly racial stuff, they would immediately come over, tell them what for, and say, if I hear that kind of talk again, you're off the team, or you're not allowed to be back in this classroom, or I'm going to tell your parents or whatever. And keep in mind, all faculty, white. About half male and female, can't really play the sex game there, but, all white, to my knowledge, almost universally Southern Baptist Christian, which leftism and the intersectionals and neo-Marxists talk about like they're the goddamn devil, pun intended. And to a T, they exhibited the absolutism of individuality, libertarianism, what being a liberal should mean. They lived that and taught that to kids. They didn't just teach it, they walked the walk too. Never did I hear any teacher speak anything but contempt and derision and shame for being connected to anything like the KKK or slavery of the past. It was terrible. And every teacher I had, every youth minister, every nurse, every guidance counselor, everybody, they all instilled that. So this concept of white guilt, it's already an excellent thing before it was weaponized. And for good reason. Owning another person is abhorrent. And I'm pretty sure everybody in the modern era believes that. So I don't even know why it's a debate. But anyway, so to wrap up, I know that I've blathered on for a while. To wrap up, the reason I believe the white supremacy narrative that we're taught is baloney is because I would have seen it. I would have lived it these last 40 years. I have white friends. I go to white places, I guess, if you want to get racial about it. I don't see or hear anything. I don't get on an elevator or go to a department store where there's almost all white people. And if one or two black people come in, I don't see any white person giving them the stink eye. And when they leave, I don't see or hear anyone being like those stupid ends, or I wish they wouldn't come here, or oh, I'm glad they left, I feel safer. Never once in my adult life have I experienced that firsthand. Anywhere. Well, I take that back. I did experience it, but it was against white people in Albuquerque, but I don't know. I don't really care. I think that's more of a product of media and social media, but the only time I've ever seen actual white versus black racism was when I moved to a big city. And I saw some guys arguing in a parking garage I didn't know, and a kind of white-looking guy called, I guess, an African-looking guy the N-word. That's it. And that happened about 3 years ago in Albuquerque. So, I don't know. I've lived in 4 different states. I've lived in about 15 different major cities. I've visited almost every state in America at least once. I traveled for work a lot. And I am who white supremacists would want to talk to. Outside of me being a weird eunuch. But, you know, I look like someone who is very Aryan. I talk to white people. I talk to religious people. I talk to Republicans. I am of the that would be cognizant of or approached by white supremacists. And I never once have been. I've never seen it. I became curious about 8 months ago about alt-right, about white supremacy, about white nationalism. And so I went looking. I went digging into it. 3 months. 3 months. I hit YouTube hard. Because according to the left narrative in MSM, that is the hotbed. That is the breeding ground of the evil white supremacist. That is where they breed. That's where they breed. So I went there. I found Millennial Woes. I found a bunch of other people. I listened to them. I listened to everything from Paul Ramsey to Red Elephant, White Elephant. I don't remember. But I spent months listening, really digging into the people that were white nationalists. And I don't think many of them are white supremacists, to be honest with you. They're a lot more like the machismo rednecks that were where I grew up. It's not that they want to persecute and feel superior to. They just want themselves to be in the limelight. They want themselves to be the one that the narrative is about in their own country. And I don't know, like, you see a lot of Jew memes, you see a lot of anti-black memes in that community, but I would say in 8 months of looking into it, PMing people, sending emails, going to blogs, going to forums, following YouTube, trying to find white supremacists, actual card-carrying white supremacists. I even talked on the phone to someone in, I think it was Kentucky, that was a KKK member. Had a 20-minute, not-so-pleasant phone conversation with a KKK member on the phone. The people I would consider a white supremacist that I met or could find on the internet, maybe 45, 50 people. Like, in all of America. Okay, I shouldn't even say all of America. In all of the internet. I think 3 of them lived in Europe. But so, let's say that there are 1,000 or 10,000 times the number that I could find. 50,000 people, 60,000 people in all of America that are white supremacists. There's what, 345, 350 million people in America? They're a problem? Really? There are more trans people. There are more dick-waving trannies than there are white supremacists. There are probably more trans women of color that have physical handicaps than there are white supremacists, even if you multiply the number I could find by 10,000 and put them all in America. I don't see them as a problem. I can't find them. The ones that I can find that are of the white nationalist to speak to don't act like they're white supremacists at all. They act like, you know, we should have a place. We should have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We don't like Jews and blacks and all this other stuff. And they do believe in some conspiracy theories I don't truck with. But they're not the blood and soil, let's hang them and burn them types. They're not the let's put crosses in their yard and beat them types. At least not that I could find. Like I said, 45, maybe 50, out of months of digging into every nook and cranny that would have anybody that was a white identitarian in it. That's all I could find. That's all I could find. So, if you want to look at the real threat, there is endemic racism in America. There's a lot of it. But it's not the white identitarians. It's the intersectional identitarians. Think about numbers, okay? How many millions of people identify as LGBT, right? It's like what, I think 18, 20 million? Then that number, of course, can expand. You've got professors, university staff, grad students, coast to coast. I think 78% in the social sciences. I might be misquoting Jonathan Haidt's study, but I think it's 72 to 78% in 2014 to 2016 of the social sciences were registered Democrats. So that's a left bias right there in and of itself. And then you look at the socialism, the intersectionality, modern era feminism. I don't know what number wave it's on now, probably 4th, who knows. But this is the kind of thing taught to millions and millions of Americans by cognitive I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm doing this all in one take. Taught cognitively by adults that know what they're doing. They are purposefully, like a disease vector in a biochem study, administering this racist identitarian ideology into millions and millions of Americans every day. They're even doing it in public schools now in a lot of cities. So that, to me, sounds like a systemic racist problem. If you're teaching children in public schools and private schools and universities and social media and mainstream media and nighttime entertainment, like, pick one. Pick one of the NPC channels. Even Bill Maher, who I kind of like still. Like, this concept of race and cultural narrative being an inalienable facet that you can't escape. It's collectivism and tribalism, which, to be honest, is just a nicer way to talk about racism and sexism. And it's being taught at an alarming rate in huge numbers. Now, let me ask you, which one sounds like more of a threat to you? Huh? Which one? I'll let you decide. Till next time, I'm Yizz the Eunuch. It's a new channel. I would appreciate you sharing it with your friends if you want. I know that my decor is leaving a lot to be desired, but subscribe, press the bell, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. Peace.